All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Hopefully having a great Wednesday and a wonderful week so far. You're probably pretty meetinged out at this point, but thanks for hanging with me. So today we're going to be covering structure with a purpose, and this is week 7 of continued education. So as always, we're going to begin with a quote today. So if you're not making mistakes, then you're not doing anything. John Wooden, UCLA Bruins men's basketball coach. So I think the gist of this is really if it's impossible to do anything right or wrong for that matter if we're not doing anything. So mistakes are going to be necessary for us to grow and also to learn and get better at what we do as SEs. So why are we here today? So as always, we just want to share why we're here and what the takeaways will be. So the goal of today is to reinforce structure and consistency and to create predictability in what we do. And the primary takeaway should be to understand mandatory checkpoints throughout your call structures and to ensure that we're moving meetings and calls forward rather than going around in circles, and to create a better line of sight in our pipelines. So just around the room, we're going to start off with, so how many people here have got into gotten a questions with homeowners and end up finding the re-explaining themselves, or they end up going down a rabbit hole and talking about something completely different than what they set out to do? By show of hands, how many people have had this happen to them? So it's just 2 people, 3. Guess everyone else is the best phone callers in the world. Why does this happen to us? Can I get examples of why this happens, Mark?
Sorry, I was eating.
Oh, no problem, Mark. Any reason why we get stuck in, explaining information or end up going down a rabbit hole? James, thank you.
It wasn't delivered appropriately in the first place. It didn't resonate with them. So if you're having to go back and re-explain things, I think the delivery in the first place could have been a little bit better, essentially.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I mean, I end up just talking and talking, and then just going off subject and talking about something completely different. Anne.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Sometimes if you are having a good rapport, I feel like we can get off on a tangent and then the person has to go eventually, and we didn't actually nail down some of the key things I wanted to get. So yeah, I used to do that a lot more when in the beginning, but now I'm getting better at kind of getting the answers I want, and then maybe talking about whatever we have in common.
Great, brilliant. Yeah, that's the thing, that rapport is essential to, build that trust and that connection, but you can also get carried away. And I do the same thing, and when you end up not even solving what we were there to solve in the first place, but we both decide we both like Star Wars movies. So it doesn't really help the situation. So why does this happen? So possible causes for this could be because of disorganization. For one, we might not have the right notes in the right place. We might not really, lose track of what we're talking about just because we don't have that relevant information in front of us. So being organized is massive to stay on task. Lack of confidence. How many times do we, if we don't feel confident, we're not going to give the right answers. We're going to change the subject to something we are confident about. I think me personally, there's situations where if I didn't feel comfortable talking about something, I might change the subject to something else just because I'm not confident to give the correct answers. And that takes us on to the next point. We don't know the answer. How many of us who, if we don't know the answer, instead of saying I don't know the answer, would change the situation to a different topic where we did feel comfortable, where we're actually not solving the pain point that actually came up? We've lost control of the conversation. This can also happen to us if we do lose track of the conversation, go off topic, and then we don't have any control to get back to where we started out at. And then also, just a lack of consistency can take us down, rabbit hole. If we don't stick to a structure or set out what we need to do, step by step, we're going to lose track of where we were. We're going to lack consistency. And every time we make a phone call, we're going to get a different outcome if we're not following the same structure. So what we're going to do is discuss the necessary components of the sales process. So you see here, it's broken down into 6 different facets. So we've got the introduction, the discovery, qualifications, the proposal, negotiations, and then the close of the meeting. So the introduction, that's going to be is when we're first going to give our personal and Vacasa introduction. So let the homeowners know who we are and what we do, and you know, what we can provide for them. And then also confirmation of home address and homeowner. So make sure we have the correct address on file. How many times have we called people where 10, 15 minutes down into the call, we realize they're not the homeowner? My father's the homeowner, he's not here. We've got to go through that spiel all over again. And it's also by, you know, confirming that the homeowner and the home address is correct. It's also a great way to see if they own other properties. You could call somebody and say, oh, I no longer own that home, but I do own 2 homes now on the Oregon coast. So it's going to open up possibilities for that. So very vital to know we're talking to the homeowner. And then also in the introduction, we want to discuss what the purpose of the call is. So why we're calling these people out the blue. And there's been a lot of nice approaches that I've heard from SEs where we're calling you because we manage several well-performing STRs in your neighborhood. You're stuck out to us. Another SE in another call, what he used as a great icebreaker was saying, hey, I'm contacting you because you're a home made our wish list. So we'd like to add it to our portfolio. So it's flattering, and it's also a great introduction to start the call. All right, next necessary component is the discovery. So this is when we're going to be asking questions. We're not pitching, we're just listening and asking questions. So what is your current use of the property? Is it short-term rental? Is it long-term rental? Are you only using it for family time, you know, 2 months out of the year, if that? Other responsible parties, once again, I just touched on this, super vital to get a hold of the decision maker or decision makers. So if there's only one person on the phone, see if we can, you know, rope into the other person to get on this phone call too, so we can discuss this all together. Goals for the property. What are the homeowner's goals? Is it to cover taxes, cover the mortgage? Is it just to have maintenance and upkeep? Or is it, you know, is it solely just for that income? And then uncover pain points during the discovery by asking questions. So the pain point is going to be cleaning. Is it maintenance? Is it upkeep? Is it income once again? So as far as the discovery process, is there any questions anyone on the call here asks to uncover information during this phase, different from what I've just gone over? All right, well, we'll speed along here then. All right, so next phase of the sales process is going to be the qualification. So this is, first of all, going to be eligibility and legality. So does the home have a permit? What rules and regulations, you know, exist where the home is located? If you have a question, reach out to compliance at vacasa.com. That's what they're there for, to help us out, figure out the compliance and rules around specific territories. And also, the more we go through this, the more you're going to get to know your market by finding out what the permits and regulations are. And you're going to know your market a bit better, become a complete expert in your market. It's also during this qualification period when we're going to realize if a home is a good fit for Vacasa. Is it aesthetically something we'd sign? Does it make enough money for us? Is it in an area which we can even service? So that's all going to be uncovered during this process. So pitch and value proposition. So what service can we offer to, you know, solve for that homeowner's pain point? That's what we're also going to discover during this this qualification part of the process. And then overcoming objections. We've spent a couple lessons talking about this. So basically listening is going to be your key here. Just listen to what the objections are and overcome them. And then also utilize ARM, as we mentioned before, acknowledge, respond, and then move on with the question. And then also during qualification, we're going to get the information gathering for the proposal. So bedroom count, the amenities the home has, how many beds does it have? The more information we ask, the better. As we would learn last week, the more information here that we can gather for onboarding, the easier of a process it's going to be for everybody. Any more qualification questions that anyone on this call asks during this period of the qualification process? I think everybody's pretty sleepy on this call at this time, Karen?
Well, this is sometimes it's a little dicey. You just phrase it correctly, but I like to find out what they're looking for revenue. Mm-hmm. You know, perhaps they've rented before or they have a friend that rents. So I like to get a good idea of what they're expectation is.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a question we shouldn't be scared of at all, because that helps us do our job. I think that's a fantastic question to ask, James.
Relative to eligibility, I just really want to understand what their cadence is going to look like in terms of usage.
Definitely, massively important. Thanks, James. Melissa.
So one of the things that I always make sure I discuss with them is how often do they use their home themselves?
Mm-hmm.
What availability is it really that we're going to be looking at when we market the property? And
Great.
determines, of course, what their revenue might be.
Definitely. Exactly. Great point. Good point, everybody. Yeah. And it's also during this point, I mean, the home might not be a fit for Vacasa, and we don't want to go and force a fit. I mean, I'm sure we've all been guilty of trying to force a deal just because we know it's a deal, even if we know that home isn't a great fit in the back of our heads, because it's really just going to result in, terrible onboarding experience. And it's ultimately going to just end up in the home churning within the first couple months. So not a good move for anybody. All right, the proposal period is when we're going to go through the proposal review. And as we mentioned before, ideally, if you can have all the decision makers on the phone call at that time to encounter any objections in real time, that's the ideal scenario. And also during this time, use the assumptive language. So, let's get this home going, let's get this proposal signed, push the homeowner along through the process, and also just be transparent. Let them know what we can do, what we can't do that's offered in our services. As it says here, give an in-depth explanation of our services. So, you don't have to go too in-depth if there's something that's not really going to work for them that they're not going to utilize, but let them know what we can do to solve for their pain points. And what we ultimately want to do is just show that we're listening. We want to create that trust and rapport with our homeowner and just make them feel safe by knowing that we can counter their pain points with the value that we offer. All right, negotiations. So this is going to be the question objections post-proposal. So anything that comes up, we covered a couple of weeks ago where an owner can be, skeptic. They could have a misunderstanding, drawbacks, indifference. There's different ways they might feel, and there is different tactics to cover each one of those different objections. And then a negotiation of the fee if applicable. Some markets are flat fee, so negotiations aren't quite as big of an issue. But also at this point, don't be afraid to ask the homeowner, so when do you think you're going to make a decision? Or ask them, when can we have access to the home? At this point, we should have built enough rapport that you can have a totally open conversation with them and find out what their actual real expectations are. All right, so the next point we come to is a closed meeting. So that's where hopefully we can do a DocuSign walkthrough with them on the phone. The post-signature email, we would have discussed that last week. There is a template in Sales Loft to send off after the signature, which walks them through what the next steps will be. And then also what's nice at this point is if you can introduce them to who the onboarding coordinator is, it makes it a little easier transition for that homeowner to know who they're going to be dealing with next. James.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah.
I like the sales process. I think it would be nice if you guys actually included, like, the introduction is a call in itself, and then what the next step is, because this is several different calls that you guys have married within this process in particular. It'd be nice if that was broken down for somebody who didn't quite have the experience. It starts off more so as if we're cold calling somebody and then transitions into high level pieces of the conversation. So again, for somebody at a glance to understand that this is your first call, this is the second call, this is potentially a third call in terms of the DocuSign closing, I think it would make more sense to them.
Yeah, that's great stuff, James. That's going to come up in a bit where we do go back to the initial discovery call and then it goes to the proposal call. So yeah, typically I'd say the introduction is going to be the first call. Discovery would be the second one. When you're just going to find out that information. Proposal would be a third call, and then the close would be another call when you're going to tell them what the next steps are. So yeah, that's great input, James. Thanks. So typically, we can do one call closes, but this is going to be more or less 4, if not more calls realistically to get to this point through the close. So great, thanks, James. And it's also at this close that I would also bring up a lot of things. What a lot of us don't do is at this point is ask for referrals. I think at this point you should be comfortable and have built a good enough relationship where once you have got them to sign, hey, do you know anyone else who would be interested or has a short-term rental? So this would be a fantastic time to bring that point up. Karen. Sorry, you're on mute there, Karen.
You mentioned introducing the onboarding coordinator. That's a fabulous thing. We did it. You know, last year when they were sales coordinators. I think it'd be great to do that. It would personalize it, and it would also create a relationship between us and the onboarding coordinator, because I think a lot of times we have situations where they just push it back. No, this isn't right. So that whole game goes on and on and on. It would be great if it was like, hi, I'm going to be onboarding FA 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you kind of pass it off in that really nice note, as well as they can, you know, you can have a relationship with them instead of like having them push stuff back, because that happens a lot lately.
Yeah. And I think we've all experienced that. It's great points, Karen. I think it is to make as many relationships as we can. And also when we do hand it off, it can be very vague for the homeowner to know where they are. They're kind of in limbo, like, okay, they've passed me off, haven't heard anything back. What am I supposed to be doing right now? If we can create that relationship, or like, you know, even James mentioned, get it all on a call, makes it a lot cleaner, a lot more seamless, and it's ultimately going to benefit us as SEs in the end. So good stuff. All right, so what I want to do next, everybody, is just do breakout group. We'll do probably groups of 3 or 4. So I just want you all to just talk about what are you missing from your call structures? Where do you deviate from a call structure? And discuss with your group. And really what I'd like to do is I'll just bounce ideas off each other. What works for you during the call structure? What could you use a bit of help on? Where do you come up against, you know, objections? So does that all sound good? Sound clear? Okay, well, let me get some groups. Give me just a second, guys, to get these groups set up, because they've been a little dodgy lately.